For the past few weeks, I have been knee-deep in a wonderful indie RPG called Chained Echoes. Its Kickstarter pitch promised a 16-bit adventure with magic and airships and a whole lot of inspiration from RPGs of the Super Nintendo era. Full disclosure, that's why I backed it. Now that Chained Echoes is here, I can totally see how developer Matthias Linda created it as a love letter to his favorite games growing up. We hear about that concept a lot when talking about indie games, and in truth, we all tend to bake in our inspirations one way or another. I'm a pretty big fan of 16-bit stuff too. But the way Linda wrote this particular love letter is so well done. For that reason, Chained Echoes is a resounding success. If you're watching this video, chances are quite high that you're familiar with RPGs, so let me just give you the quick setup for Chained Echoes. Don't worry, this is going to be a spoiler-free video. I'm only talking about the opening parts of the game. It's set on the continent of Volandis, where three nations once waged war against each other. Presently, they're enjoying a peace treaty, but an interruption from a giant flaming mantis monster quickly ruins all that. Some of you savvy viewers are already picking up on the nomenclature here. Chained Echoes is set in a war-torn world where history is beginning to repeat itself. The loud events of the past are now echoing in the present. That's true of the game's opening act, and it's also the philosophy by which Matthias Linda developed this game. It echoes the RPGs that he loved as a kid. In a few different interviews, he specifically called out Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy VI, Suikoden 2, and Xenogears. It's easy to see why. For example, the many mech suits of Xenogears have a direct correlation to the powerful sky armor suits of Chained Echoes. Apparently, the game even got delayed for a bit because Linda was so focused on playing Xenoblade Chronicles 3. But let's stick with those first two games I mentioned, Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy VI. We're going to focus on these classics because, frankly, they're the ones that I've actually played. Plus, the whole point of this video is to talk about how Chained Echoes relates to 16-bit games. Yay for accurate titles! Staying in alphabetical order, we'll begin with Chrono Trigger. That's actually where Chained Echoes begins too. Our first hero, Glenn, is woken up by his mother at home. It's a perfect match for how Chrono's mom wakes him up at the beginning of Chrono Trigger, and the room is nearly identical too. But Matthias Linda didn't just copy the opening scene for sake of having a reference. In the words of the great philosopher Biggie Smalls, it was all a dream, and Glenn wakes up in reality aboard an airship in the middle of a battle. Linda made it a point to riff on these memorable moments. Another easy one to pick up on is the Carnival, which is obviously quite similar to Chrono Trigger's Millennial Fair. It's the introduction of another main character, Sir Victor. He gets to engage in a variety of minigames and earn prizes, but instead of taking home the goods, he ends up getting ripped off by a thief named Sienna. We'll talk more about her later. Thinking back on Chrono Trigger is a great framework for talking about similar scenes and specific references in Chained Echoes. Fans probably already noticed that Glenn's name is also the real name of Frog, the cursed knight from Chrono Trigger. It's easy to ship him with fellow party member Len, not just because their names rhyme, but also because they share quiet moments together, like this campfire scene. Looks a lot like when Luca patched up Robo after he stayed in the past to farm the forest, right? The set dressing is also quite similar as you approach the Dream Eater boss fight. The snuffing out of the candles is a nice match for the dimly lit walk up to Magus in his castle. At least Magus turns into a friend later on. That's true, and you can see a lot of those same bonds of friendship play out as the party squabbles, works together, gets separated, reunites, and learns to trust one another. That's a concept I covered more closely in my Chrono Trigger video, so this time, I'd like to turn to Final Fantasy to talk about Chained Echoes party members. Chrono Trigger was a great lens to look through in terms of specific references, and Chained Echoes does have a few of those for Final Fantasy as well. The steampunk influences are there, and I definitely see a resemblance between the Kraken and Ultros. The Purple Octopus debuted in Final Fantasy IV, but his appearance in Final Fantasy VI cemented him as a recurring series boss. 6 also happens to be one of the key inspirations for Chained Echoes. The main component of that is party composition. Chained Echoes features a large cast, 8 main heroes, plus plenty of side characters and temporary party members. While Glenn does get some special attention, it's up for debate as to who is the quote-unquote main character here, in the same way that Tara Branford is the face of Final Fantasy VI, but far from the only person of interest. Both games do a great job of covering character archetypes. In the opening moments, you of course start with Glenn. He's the soldier turned freedom fighter, mechanically something like a paladin. His pal Killian is a straightforward knight, swinging a heavy greatsword. Len is a spear fighter with leaping elemental attacks, which makes her a dragoon. Her ward Rob is a classic bow and arrow wielding ranger. Then there's the aforementioned Sir Victor, a classic bard who plays music to cast magic that buffs the party. Finally, we have Sienna, the devious but complicated thief. Matthias Linda has actually named Sienna as his favorite party member, and I can see why. To start, her bright red outfit and hair aren't exactly suited for sneaking around, but she apparently enjoys the infamy of being a famous thief. I certainly hope so, because your first moments with her involve stealing a variety of treasures and immediately getting caught. But we also see the reluctant hero beneath the surface, as she turns back toward a sick girl or decides to stick with the party because that's the safer option. Every party member gets moments to shine like this, and I think that's where we can draw the clearest comparison to Final Fantasy VI. It does the same thing, giving its main cast their own goals, objectives, and arcs, while also offering special side characters later on. It's not easy to share the spotlight across the full party with such an ensemble, but Chained Echoes pulls it off. Without being overly serious too. That's another important aspect here. The game is funny. Like I said earlier, Matthias Linda is riffing on established RPG tropes and specific scenes. When Len is introduced, she's immediately described as a secret princess. Instead of saving this for some plot-specific reveal, Linda just tosses the trope right out there for everyone to see. One of my favorite jokes comes just after you enter the game's first big open area, Roland Fields. A villager mentions that her husband has been obsessed with the windmills north of their house. When you get there, you see why. Her husband's name is Don Q, aka Don Quixote, the literary figure famous for tilting at windmills. This would be a fine enough reference on its own. In the novel, the joke is that Don Quixote stupidly thinks the windmills are giants. In Chained Echoes, this concept gets turned on its head. The broken windmill actually is a giant mimic. But you don't have to have an appreciation for RPG tropes or literary classics to get the jokes in this game. There's plenty of other goofy stuff, like the feuding merfolk couple. The wife prefers the beach and salt water, but the husband is happier in the fresh water of the river. The standout for many players is the turtle race, one of the minigames that Sir Victor can bet on at the carnival. I'm not exactly sure what I was expecting to hear when the race started, but it wasn't this. Shout out to composer Eddie Marianucro, by the way. Chained Echoes is a one-man dev team in Matthias Linda, with the exception of the soundtrack. You've been hearing Marianucro's work in the background this whole time. Matthias likes his puns, and Eddie likes his tunes. And I love going a layer deeper, so let's do that. Why did I take the time to talk about the jokes in Chained Echoes? Well, because writing a love letter to the games you grew up with doesn't just mean developing an RPG that's exactly like them. Love also means asking yourself what you can do to improve the situation. For Matthias Linda, that means not just pointing back to his favorite games, but also cracking jokes about them and looking for ways to make his own adventure stand out. In Chained Echoes, a lot of that comes from quality of life improvements, many of which are simple but effective. You can't talk to each individual townsperson, and you can't enter every single building when you find a new settlement. Only those relevant to the main plot, side missions, and shopping are open. This means you don't waste your time chatting with every NPC who has nothing important to say or poking around in houses where you just don't belong. Simple modernizations like autosaves and bulk selling at merchants streamline the experience even further. That said, nothing feels as streamlined as the battle system. The first few Final Fantasy games were strict turn-based affairs. But by the time we reached FF4 and Chrono Trigger, we'd moved on to active time battles. Chained Echoes adheres to a strict one character at a time turn system, but it never feels sluggish. Turn order is always visible, so you know who's on deck, whether they're on your side or not. And since your squad has 8 main party members, you can freely tag team with each fighter's alternate as the battle goes on. In the same way that the story is equally spread among party members, you can have them all share in the glory of battle too. Swapping a hero with their partner opens up a whole new level of strategy, especially when coupled with the overdrive bar. This is the crown jewel of Chained Echo's battle system. After you deal enough damage or take enough hits, your party enters overdrive mode. This means you hit harder, defend yourself better, and get to use all your special skills for half the cost. But you can't just go ham the moment you get a hot streak going. Beyond the overdrive meter is the overheat section. If you go too far, you'll start taking more damage. This creates a beautiful balancing act that encourages you to use a variety of attacks and abilities to keep yourself in that sweet spot. And did I mention that your health and tech points are replenished for every battle? Say goodbye to paying for rooms at the inn. I think it's safe to say that Matthias Linda wants players to be treated well. I definitely feel that way every time I sit down to dig deeper into this adventure. Chained Echoes is a love letter to the 16-bit RPGs that developer Matthias Linda played growing up. We can see it in the direct references that it makes to Chrono Trigger, and in the party composition and equal attention it gives to its ensemble of party members, a la Final Fantasy VI. It doesn't just poke at your nostalgia though, it actively riffs on RPG tropes and looks for ways to improve the formula. After all, an Echo isn't a perfect match for its original sound. It's close, but different. In the case of Chained Echoes, that means mixing in quality of life improvements and introducing a stellar battle system that makes the game stand on its own merits. Like I said at the top, I supported this game on Kickstarter a few years ago, and I'm glad I did. I wanted to see this 16-bit vision brought to life, and now I get to actually play it. There is so much more than what I touched on here. I wanted to stay spoiler-free and stick with the RPGs that I also love, but if you play it yourself, you'll catch so many more references than what I talked about here. You'll find your own connections with the characters, develop your own battle strategies, and create your own memories across the continent of Volandis. I recommend that you do. Maybe it's redundant to end the video by saying that. Maybe I'm repeating myself. Or maybe it's just an echo. Hey, I'm still in my 16-bit form, but I wanted to say thank you so much for watching this video. If you like what Framework is doing, definitely hit that subscribe button in the middle. It would help me out an awful lot if you do. And if you want to see what we've already cooked up, you can hit that link on the far left. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.